The Grand Hall of the Vylothian Empire was packed wall to wall with thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Today was special. Today, Emperor Cravath was finally going to show the entire empire something that had been driving everyone crazy for 30 years. The air buzzed with excitement as holographic cameras floated above the crowd, broadcasting this moment to billions watching from distant worlds. Beth Morrison stood at the very back of the hall, near the service entrance where nobody would notice her. She wore the same gray maintenance uniform she put on every single day, her mop and bucket sitting against the wall beside her. At 42 years old, she had worked as a janitor in the Imperial Palace for 5 years now. Long enough to know that people like her were basically invisible. The Empire's elite looked right through human workers like they were part of the furniture. But Beth had always been curious. Even when she was a kid growing up on Earth, she loved learning about ancient history and old civilizations. Now, standing in this magnificent hall with its soaring ceilings and marble floors, she couldn't help but want to see what all the fuss was about. Emperor Cravath stepped onto the central platform, his 4 arms spread wide in a dramatic gesture. He was an imposing figure, standing nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in the smooth purple scales typical of his species. When he spoke, his voice boomed through the chamber, instantly translated into 100 different languages by the technology embedded in everyone's communication devices. "Citizens of the Empire," he announced, "today we unveil the greatest mystery our civilization has ever faced." Behind him, a shimmering containment field powered up, and there it was. The mysterious tablet floated in the center, roughly the size of a large dining table. It looked like it was made of crystal or glass, but with an inner light that pulsed softly. The surface was completely covered in symbols and markings that seemed to shift and change depending on how you looked at them. Beth squinted, trying to get a better view from her spot in the back. Even from this distance, she could tell there was something special about those symbols. They had an organic quality to them, like they were almost alive. "This artifact was discovered in the Forgotten Temple on Xanthros Prime," the Emperor continued, his voice dripping with pride and frustration in equal measure. "Our archaeologists believe it is older than any civilization we have records of. Older than the First Empire. Older than the Great Alliance. This tablet predates everything we know about intelligent life in this sector of space." The crowd pressed forward, everyone wanting a closer look. Diplomats in fancy robes rubbed shoulders with wealthy merchants dressed in the latest fashions. Scientists and scholars craned their necks, their eyes fixed on the glowing artifact. Everyone had heard rumors about the mysterious tablet, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. "For 30 years, Cravath said, and now there was definite frustration in his voice, "our best minds have tried to decode these symbols. We have brought in linguists from every known species. We have used the most advanced artificial intelligence systems in the galaxy. We have run every possible analysis, used every decryption method we know." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence build. "And we have failed. Completely and utterly failed. Not a single symbol has been successfully translated. Not one." A ripple of amazement spread through the crowd. Beth heard people whispering around her. In an age where you could point a device at anything written in any language and get an instant translation, the idea that something could be truly untranslatable seemed impossible. It went against everything modern technology promised. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with challenge as he delivered his next statement. "Therefore, I make a pledge to all of you here today and to everyone watching across the Empire. To anyone from any species from any world, who can translate even a single line of this tablet's text, I will personally grant them my entire fortune in rare metals." The hall erupted in shocked gasps and excited chatter. Beth felt her jaw drop slightly. The Emperor's personal fortune? That was enough wealth to buy your own moon, maybe even a small planet. It was an unimaginable amount of money. But then the laughter started. It began with a few chuckles from the nobles nearest the throne, then spread through the crowd like a wave. People were laughing because the challenge was absurd. If the Empire's quantum computers couldn't crack the code, if teams of expert linguists had failed, if 30 years of intense study had produced nothing, what chance did any individual have? It was a safe bet for the Emperor. A grand, dramatic gesture that would cost him nothing while generating incredible publicity for the artifact. Everyone in the galaxy would be talking about this. Amateur cryptographers and wannabe scholars would waste years trying to solve it. But nobody would succeed. Nobody could. Beth watched as the ceremony continued. Important people took turns approaching the tablet, studying it for a few moments, shaking their heads in wonder and confusion, then moving on. She saw them touch the containment field as if physical contact might reveal some hidden truth. She saw them take photographs and videos from every angle, but mostly she saw them give up. The symbols on the tablet continued to pulse with that strange inner light. Beth found herself staring at them, even though she was too far away to make out any real details. Something about them nagged at the back of her mind, like a word on the tip of your tongue that you just can't remember. As the official ceremony wound down and the crowds began to disperse, Beth picked up her mop and got back to work. She had floors to clean, bathrooms to sanitize, trash to collect. The Empire didn't stop needing janitors just because the Emperor put on a fancy show. But as she worked her way through the hall, pushing her bucket and mop across those gleaming marble floors, she kept glancing back at the tablet. The crowd had thinned out now. The important people had moved on to their next appointment, their next meeting, their next display of wealth and status. Soon the hall would be empty except for the cleaning crew and the glowing artifact floating in its containment field. Beth had learned a long time ago not to dream too big. Life had taught her that lesson over and over. She had grown up poor on Earth, worked hard to get off planet, and ended up in a job that paid just enough to survive. Humans weren't exactly treated badly in the Empire, but they weren't treated as equals either. They were the cheap labor, the workers nobody paid much attention to. Still, as she mopped the same section of floor for the third time, her eyes kept drifting back to those mysterious symbols. And in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had seen something like them before. The palace was a completely different place after midnight. All the important people went home to their fancy apartments and private estates. The diplomats stopped their endless meetings. The guards changed shifts, and the new ones were usually half asleep at their posts. The massive building became quiet except for the soft hum of air systems and the occasional footsteps of the night cleaning crew. Beth preferred working nights for exactly this reason. During the day she had to dodge crowds and stay out of everyone's way. She had to be invisible, moving through the halls like a ghost while people pretended she didn't exist. But at night, the palace belonged to her and the other workers. They could take their time, chat with each other, and occasionally stop to look at the amazing things that filled these halls. Tonight, though, Beth wasn't interested in chatting. She finished her assigned sections as quickly as possible, then casually made her way back to the grand exhibition hall. The tablet was still there, of course, floating in its blue containment field. The soft glow it gave off was the only real light in the otherwise dark chamber. She set down her cleaning supplies and walked slowly toward it. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space. Security cameras tracked her movements from the corners of the room, but she had clearance to be here. Janitors needed access to every room in the palace. After all, who would ever suspect the cleaning staff of doing anything important? Up close, without all the crowds and noise, the tablet was even more impressive. It was massive, easily 2 meters tall and a meter wide. The symbols covered every inch of its surface, arranged in neat sections that reminded Beth of paragraphs in a book. Some symbols were simple geometric shapes like circles and triangles. Others were incredibly complex, with multiple elements woven together in intricate patterns. Beth pulled out her personal datapad, an old Earth model she had brought with her when she left home 5 years ago. Most people in the palace used the standard Empire-issued devices, but Beth had kept her own. It was loaded with books, photos, and files from Earth. Sometimes, when she got homesick, she would scroll through pictures of places she used to know. Not that she wanted to go back. Life on Earth had been even harder than life here. But still, it was home. She had also loaded her datapad with something else. During her limited free time over the years, she had developed a hobby of collecting information about ancient human civilizations. She found it fascinating to read about the Mayans building their pyramids, the Egyptians creating their monuments, the Polynesians navigating vast oceans in wooden boats. These people had accomplished incredible things with nothing but basic tools and determination. Now, standing in front of the mysterious tablet, Beth opened those files on a whim. She started scrolling through images of ancient Mayan glyphs, not really expecting to find anything. Just curious. Just looking. Then her fingers stopped moving. There, on her screen, was a spiral symbol. And there, on the tablet right in front of her, was an almost identical spiral. The one on the tablet was more elaborate, more evolved somehow, but the core design was unmistakably the same. Beth felt her heart start beating faster. No, it had to be a coincidence. Lots of cultures use spirals in their art and writing. It didn't mean anything. But she kept looking. She pulled up files on Celtic designs and there was another match. The knot patterns the ancient Celts had carved into stone monuments looked remarkably similar to a cluster of symbols on the left side of the tablet. She opened her Polynesian files and found 3 more connections. Norse runes gave her another one. Her hands were shaking now as she worked through her entire collection of ancient Earth writing systems. Symbol after symbol matched or came very close to matching things she saw on the tablet. It was like looking at a puzzle made from pieces of every ancient human culture, mixed together and evolved into something new. Beth stepped back and just stared at the tablet for a long moment. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This was impossible. Humans didn't have space travel 8,000 years ago. They barely had agriculture. The most advanced technology on Earth back then was maybe a stone axe or a pottery wheel. But the evidence was right there in front of her eyes. These weren't alien symbols. They were based on human writing systems from Earth's ancient past. Which meant that somehow, impossibly, people from Earth had been in this part of the galaxy thousands of years ago. Beth spent the next hour taking careful pictures of every section of the tablet. She worked methodically, making sure to capture clear images of each symbol. Then she started cross-referencing them with her historical files, building a database of matches and similarities. She worked with the focused intensity of someone who had stumbled onto something huge and knew it. The symbols weren't just decorative. The more she studied them, the more she became convinced they were actually a language. They had structure and pattern. They repeated in ways that suggested grammar and syntax. And if they were based on ancient Earth writing systems, then maybe, just maybe, she could actually read them. The thought hit her like a physical shock. She could translate this. She could actually solve the Emperor's challenge. But more than that, she could prove that humanity had a history in space that nobody knew about. They weren't just the newcomers who got discovered by more advanced aliens 50 years ago. They were explorers who had reached for the stars when Earth was still young. Beth looked down at her gray uniform with her name embroidered on the chest. Then she looked back at the glowing tablet. Who was she kidding? She was a janitor with a hobby, not a trained expert. The Empire's best scientists had worked on this tablet for 30 years and gotten nowhere. What made her think she could do better? But then again, those scientists had been looking for an alien language. They had assumed the tablet was created by some unknown ancient civilization from this part of space. They had never considered that it might be human in origin. They had been asking the wrong questions, looking in the wrong direction. Beth made her decision. She would spend her night shifts for the next week studying this tablet. She would use every scrap of knowledge she had about ancient Earth cultures to try to decode its message. And when she was absolutely certain, when she had verified her translation beyond any doubt, she would submit it through the official channels. Maybe they would laugh at her. Probably they would dismiss her without even looking at her work. A human janitor claiming to solve a mystery that had stumped the Empire's greatest minds? It sounded ridiculous even to her. But at least she would know she tried. At least she would have taken her shot at doing something important, something that mattered. And if she was right, if her translation was accurate, then the entire galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity. Beth picked up her mop and went back to work, but her mind was already 1,000 miles away. The symbols danced behind her closed eyes whenever she blinked. Ancient patterns waiting to tell their story to someone who finally spoke their language. Tomorrow night, she would come back and continue her research. She would piece together this puzzle one symbol at a time. And maybe, just maybe, she would change the world. For the next 7 nights, Beth lived in 2 completely different worlds. During the day, she tried to sleep in her cramped apartment, but her dreams were filled with spirals and triangles and symbols that seemed to move and shift. She would wake up with a start, grab her data pad, and frantically make notes about patterns she had noticed in her sleep. Her small room became cluttered with printouts and scribbled notes taped to every available wall surface. At night, she went to work like always, but everything had changed. She moved through her cleaning duties on autopilot, her mind barely registering what her hands were doing. She mopped floors and emptied trash bins with mechanical efficiency, always making sure her route took her past the exhibition hall multiple times. And when the palace grew quiet enough, when she was certain no one was paying attention, she would slip into that darkened chamber and continue her research. Her datapad became her lifeline. She had downloaded every fragment of information about ancient Earth languages she could find in the public archives. Academic papers about Proto-Indo-European roots. Studies of how Mayan mathematicians used symbols to represent complex calculations. Analyses of Polynesian navigation techniques and how they recorded star positions. Everything she could get her hands on, she devoured. The work was frustrating and exhilarating in equal measure. Sometimes she would spend an entire night convinced she understood a section, only to realize the next night that her translation made no sense in context. Other times, pieces would fall into place so perfectly that she wanted to shout with excitement. On the 4th night, Beth had her first major breakthrough. She realized the tablet wasn't written in just one system. The ancient humans who created it had done something brilliant. They had taken symbols from multiple Earth cultures and combined them into a unified language. It was like they had cherry-picked the best aspects of each writing system and merged them into something more efficient and powerful than any single culture could have created alone. Circular symbols almost always represented celestial bodies like stars and planets. Triangular shapes indicated direction or movement through space. Those spiral patterns she had noticed first? They meant time or cycles, the endless rotation of seasons and years. Wave patterns suggested energy or radiation, things that flowed and moved. By the sixth night, Beth could read basic phrases. Simple concepts like journey across stars, and home world waiting, and danger approaches. Her heart pounded as she worked, afraid to hope but unable to stop herself from hoping anyway. By the seventh night, she understood what she was looking at. And the knowledge made her hands shake so badly she had to set down her datapad and take several deep breaths. It was a star map combined with a warning message. The tablet had been created by humans who lived roughly 8,000 years ago, during Earth's Neolithic period. They had found something incredible. A wormhole, a natural tunnel through space that connected distant parts of the galaxy. And they had been brave enough or crazy enough to actually use it. Beth could almost picture them. Ancient people who should have been farming or hunting, instead building some kind of vessel and traveling through a cosmic shortcut to reach this region of space. Some of them had made it back to Earth eventually. But others had been stranded here when the wormhole collapsed behind them. They had tried to build new lives on alien worlds, establishing settlements and passing down their knowledge until their technology failed and they faded into forgotten history. But the warning was what really mattered. The tablet described a cosmic phenomenon that these ancient explorers had detected. A massive wave of exotic radiation that pulsed through this region of space every few thousand years. It wouldn't kill people instantly, but it would interfere with biological systems and technology in dangerous ways. The explorers had done the math and calculated when the next wave would arrive. Beth checked her translation 3 times, but the numbers were clear. According to the ancient dating system on the tablet, the radiation wave was due to arrive within the next 10 years. Maybe less. And the tablet included specific coordinates. Exact locations where the radiation would be strongest. Beth pulled up current galactic charts on her datapad and felt her stomach drop. Those coordinates matched inhabited star systems. Billions of people and aliens lived in the danger zones, completely unaware of what was coming. This wasn't just about winning a prize anymore. This wasn't about proving humanity had explored space thousands of years ago. This was about saving lives across multiple solar systems. People needed to know about this threat so they could prepare and protect themselves. But doubt crept into Beth's mind like cold water. What if she was wrong? What if she was seeing patterns that didn't exist, making connections that were just coincidences? She was a janitor with a hobby in ancient history. She had never formally studied linguistics or archaeology. The Empire's trained experts with their advanced degrees and powerful computers had failed to translate this tablet. What made her think she could succeed where they had failed? Beth spent her 8th night obsessively double-checking everything. She verified every symbol, every connection, every logical step in her translation. She cross-referenced the star map with current galactic charts, and the coordinates matched perfectly. Inhabited systems lined up exactly where the ancient warning said the danger would be strongest. She searched through scientific journals that were publicly available through the palace's information network. Recent papers described strange energy readings in those exact systems. Anomalies that astrophysicists couldn't explain. The readings matched the radiation patterns described in the ancient warning. Everything fit together. Her translation wasn't just plausible or possible. It was accurate. On the 9th night, Beth made 3 complete copies of her translation. She included detailed notes explaining her methodology, showing how ancient Earth writing systems connected to the symbols on the tablet. She cross-referenced everything with stellar cartography and recent scientific observations. She made it as comprehensive and professional as she possibly could. She kept 1 copy hidden in her apartment, tucked inside a book where no one would think to look. She uploaded another to secure cloud storage just in case. And she prepared the 3rd copy for official submission. The palace had a formal process for responding to the Emperor's challenge. There was an administrative office that logged all submissions, assigned them reference numbers and forwarded them to imperial scholars for review. Beth had heard that hundreds of translations had been submitted over the years. Amateur code breakers, ambitious academics, even con artists hoping to get lucky. Every single one had been rejected. At the end of her shift, as morning light started brightening the palace towers, Beth walked to the administrative office. Her legs felt weak and her hands were sweating. The clerk behind the desk was a tired-looking Vilothian, clearly at the end of his own long night shift. He barely glanced at her as she handed over her datapad with the translation file. "Name?" he asked in a flat, bored voice. "Beth Morrison. Human. Maintenance Division." Now he looked up, mild surprise crossing his features. But he simply logged the information without comment. "You understand that submitting a fraudulent translation is a criminal offense, punishable by imprisonment and deportation?" Beth's mouth went dry, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand. My translation is genuine and accurate." The clerk tagged her file and sent it into the review system. "You'll receive a response within 30 days if your submission warrants examination. Most likely you'll hear nothing at all." He looked past her. "Next." Beth walked away, her legs feeling like rubber. It was done. She had taken her shot. Now all she could do was wait. Beth woke to the sound of heavy fists pounding on her apartment door. For a confused moment, still foggy with sleep, she thought maybe there was a fire in the building. Then she looked at her door's security panel and her blood ran cold. Imperial guards stood outside, 3 of them, wearing the distinctive red and gold uniforms that meant they answered directly to the Emperor himself. Her first panicked thought was that she was being arrested. Submitting a false translation was a crime, and maybe they thought she had tried to scam the Emperor. Her second thought was that she should have kept her mouth shut, should have stayed invisible like she had always done. The lead guard's voice came through the intercom, stern and commanding. "Beth Morrison. You are summoned to the Imperial Palace immediately. You have 10 minutes to make yourself presentable. Do not delay." "Wait, what? Why?" Beth's voice came out shaky. "The Emperor himself has requested your presence. 9 minutes now." Beth's mind raced as she threw on the cleanest clothes she owned. The Emperor wanted to see her personally? That didn't sound like arrest protocol. They said summoned, not detained. Her hands trembled as she tried to brush her hair into something presentable. This could only mean one thing. They had actually looked at her translation. And if they were bringing her to the Emperor, it meant something had happened. Something big. The guards waited in tense silence as she emerged from her apartment. They formed up around her, not roughly but firmly, and escorted her through the building. Her neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and cracked doors, watching with wide eyes as Beth Morrison the janitor was led away by Imperial guards. The walk through the palace was surreal. Instead of using the service corridors and back passages where workers usually traveled, the guards took her through the main public halls. Citizens and courtiers stopped to stare as she passed. A human in ordinary clothes surrounded by the Emperor's personal guard. Beth felt her face burning with embarrassment. She tried to keep her head up, tried not to look as terrified as she felt. The throne room doors were enormous, carved from a single massive piece of black stone imported from the Emperor's home world. They swung open silently on hidden mechanisms, revealing a chamber that stole Beth's breath. The ceiling soared at least 20 meters high, covered in detailed murals showing the Empire's greatest achievements. Hundreds of alien nobles lined the walls in their finest clothing, their conversations dying to whispers as Beth entered. At the far end of the chamber, Emperor Cravath sat on his throne, an imposing figure that seemed to radiate power and authority. To his right stood an elderly Vilothian wearing elaborate purple robes. Beth recognized the color. Purple meant head scholar, one of the highest academic positions in the entire empire. To the Emperor's left, floating in a portable containment field, was the tablet. Beth's legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The guards guided her forward down the long central aisle. Every eye in the room tracked her movement. She heard soft laughter from some of the nobles. This was entertainment for them, watching a human janitor summoned before the Emperor. They probably thought it was hilarious. The walk seemed to take forever. Each step echoed in the vast chamber. Beth kept her eyes focused forward, trying not to look at the hundreds of faces staring at her with expressions ranging from amusement to contempt to curiosity. "Approach the throne," Emperor Cravath commanded when she reached the base of the platform. Beth climbed the 7 wide steps, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Up close, the Emperor was even more intimidating. He towered over her, his 4 eyes studying her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. "You are the human who submitted the translation?" His voice was deep and resonant. "Yes, Your Majesty." Beth was surprised her voice came out steady. "A janitor." The Emperor's mandibles clicked together. Beth had learned enough about Vilothian expressions to know this could mean many things. Amusement. Disbelief. Annoyance. "Yes, Your Majesty. Do you understand the severity of what you have done?" Submitting a false translation to the imperial throne is considered fraud. The punishment is 5 years imprisonment followed by permanent expulsion from Empire space. You would be sent back to Earth and never allowed to leave again. Beth's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to speak. I understand the law, Your Majesty. But my translation is not false. It is accurate. The throne room erupted in laughter. The sound echoed off the high ceiling, waves of mockery washing over Beth from all sides. How dare this human show such confidence? How dare she stand before the Emperor and insist she had solved a mystery that had defeated the Empire's greatest minds? Beth felt her cheeks burning, but she kept her eyes on the Emperor. She had come this far. She wouldn't back down now. Emperor Cravath raised one hand, and the chamber fell instantly silent. Scholar Thendrix, present your findings. The elderly Vilothian in purple robes stepped forward. He held a datapad and his expression was complicated. Beth saw confusion there and something else. Was it respect? Disbelief? She couldn't tell. Your Majesty, members of the court, Thendrix began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. I have spent the past 14 hours reviewing this translation with my entire team. I must confess, when I first saw that it came from a human maintenance worker, I expected to dismiss it within minutes. I fully intended to recommend fraud charges. Beth felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. However, Thendrix continued, and now his voice took on a tone of wonder, I cannot do that. Because this human's translation is correct. The throne room exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted questions and protests. Some insisted it must be a mistake. Others demanded to see the proof. The noise level rose until Emperor Cravath raised all 4 of his arms, demanding silence. Explain yourself, scholar, the Emperor commanded. Thendrix activated his datapad, and a massive holographic display materialized in the air above them. This human correctly identified something that all our experts in AI systems missed. The symbols are not from an unknown alien language. They are derivatives of ancient Earth writing systems. Mayan, Celtic, Polynesian, Norse and several others, combined into a unified language. More gasps from the assembled crowd. Beth watched faces transform from mockery to shock to outright denial. Her translation reveals that this tablet is both a star map and a warning, Thendrix continued. It was created by human explorers approximately 8,000 years ago. They discovered a wormhole and used it to travel to this region of space. Some returned home. Others were stranded when the wormhole collapsed. Impossible, someone shouted from the crowd. Humans were primitive then. The evidence does not lie, Thendrix replied calmly. Furthermore, the warning described in the tablet is critical. A radiation wave cycles through this region every several thousand years. The human's translation provides coordinates for 37 star systems that will be most affected. We cross-referenced with our astrophysics division. They have been detecting unexplained anomalies in those exact systems for the past decade. This translation explains what they have been seeing. Emperor Cravath leaned forward, his 4 eyes fixed on Beth with new intensity. Is this true, human? Your people were exploring space while you still lived in primitive conditions. Beth's voice was stronger now. According to the tablet, yes, Your Majesty. They found a way. Some made it home. Others stayed. They left this warning hoping someone would find it and understand. And this radiation wave. The danger is real? Yes, Your Majesty. If my calculations are correct, it will reach the affected systems within 8 to 10 years. It won't kill people immediately, but it will cause serious damage to living cells and interfere with technology. Billions of people could be affected if they're not warned and protected. The throne room had gone completely silent. Everyone was processing this information. An ancient human mystery. A present danger. All solved by a janitor with a hobby. 3 months had passed since that day in the throne room, and Beth Morrison still couldn't quite believe her life was real. She stood in front of a building that seemed impossible every time she looked at it. The Human Cultural Heritage Institute occupied an entire converted palace complex in the capital city's academic district. The banner hanging above the entrance displayed those same ancient symbols from the tablet, the ones that had changed everything. Beth wasn't cleaning floors anymore. Her official title was Director of Archaeological Linguistics, and she had a team of 20 researchers working under her guidance. Some were human, others were aliens who had become genuinely interested in uncovering humanity's forgotten history. The adjustment had been strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Sometimes she still woke up expecting to hear an alarm telling her it was time for another night shift with her mop and bucket. The Institute's main hall had been transformed into something magnificent. The original tablet still held the place of honor in the center, floating in its containment field, but now it was surrounded by dozens of other discoveries. Word of Beth's translation had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and suddenly everyone was looking for evidence of ancient human presence on distant worlds. What they found had been absolutely stunning. On a planet called Kelroth 4, archaeologists discovered ruins of a settlement that was 8,000 years old. The architectural style matched construction techniques from Neolithic Earth. Stone arrangements that lined up with Earth constellations. Tool marks that matched patterns human hands would make. On Pranda Station, a deep space research outpost, scientists found a derelict ship drifting in the void. It was ancient beyond measure, built with techniques that predated known human technology, but analysis of the materials proved it had originated from Earth. The most amazing discovery came from a moon orbiting the Emperor's own home world. Explorers found a cave system with walls covered in paintings. The images showed constellations that were only visible from Earth's northern hemisphere. They showed humans in primitive clothing pointing up at the stars. And they showed what looked like a massive tear in space, glowing with strange light. The ancient wormhole, preserved in ochre and charcoal by people who had witnessed something impossible. Beth walked through the exhibition slowly, reviewing each display before the day's visitors arrived. Every artifact represented courage and innovation, people pushing beyond everything they knew to see what waited among the stars. She felt connected to those ancient explorers across the vast gulf of time. They had been ordinary people who did extraordinary things, just like she had tried to do. Director Morrison? A young researcher named Danny approached, slightly out of breath. The delegation from Earth has arrived early. They're waiting in your office. Beth had been expecting this visit, though not quite this soon. Earth's government had taken a sudden interest in the Institute once they realized one of their own had made galactic headlines. They wanted to be involved in the research. More importantly, they wanted to make sure humans throughout the Empire benefited from the new policies Emperor Kravoth had implemented after Beth's discovery. The delegation waited in her office, for officials in formal business attire that looked oddly out of place among the Institute's casual academic atmosphere. They stood when Beth entered, offering respectful greetings that still felt surreal to her. Important people treating her like she mattered. Director Morrison, the lead official, began once everyone was seated. We want to thank you. What you've accomplished has changed everything for our species. Because of your discovery, humans are finally being taken seriously across the Empire. Another official leaned forward enthusiastically. Applications from humans to advanced educational programs have tripled in the past 3 months. Humans are being hired for scientific positions, diplomatic roles, engineering jobs that were essentially closed to us before. You've changed the trajectory of our entire species' future in this galaxy. Beth shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had never set out to change anything. She had just been curious about some symbols on an ancient tablet. I only translated what was there. I didn't do anything heroic. But you did, a third official insisted. You proved that humans have been explorers since ancient times. You showed that our ancestors were brave enough to cross the galaxy when they barely understood fire. That matters. That changes how everyone sees us, including how we see ourselves. They talked for over an hour about partnerships and funding, about expanding the research, about building additional institutes on other worlds. Beth found herself negotiating like she had been doing this her whole life, though part of her still felt like a janitor pretending to be someone important. After the delegation finally left, Beth returned to the exhibition hall. Visitors had started arriving, a mixed crowd of humans and aliens, all eager to see proof of humanity's ancient heritage. She watched them move through the displays, saw the expressions on their faces. Pride, wonder, curiosity. The aliens looked at these artifacts with new respect, and the humans looked at them with a sense of belonging they had never felt before. An older Vilothian scholar approached her, someone she vaguely recognized from the palace. Director Morrison, I wanted to apologize. When I first heard that a human janitor claimed to have solved the tablet, I laughed. I thought it was absurd, impossible. Most people did, Beth said without any bitterness. I would have probably thought the same thing. I realize now that I failed to consider something important. Sometimes the answer to an impossible question requires an impossible perspective. All our greatest minds approached the tablet as an alien artifact. You approached it as something potentially human. That simple difference made all the difference. He wandered off to study a display of ancient tools, leaving Beth to think about his words. She thought about all the humans still working maintenance jobs throughout the Empire, still driving cargo haulers, still doing the thousand small necessary tasks that kept civilization running smoothly. How many of them had knowledge or insights or skills that could change the world if someone just gave them a chance? Her datapad chirped with an incoming message. It was from Scholar Thendrix, now a close colleague. The Astrophysics Division had finished their analysis of the radiation wave warning. Beth's translation was completely accurate. The wave would arrive in approximately 9 years, and they were already developing shielding technology and evacuation protocols for the systems that would be most affected. Because of her work, billions of people across dozens of worlds would be protected from a disaster they never knew was coming. That evening, after all the visitors had gone home, Beth returned to stand before the original tablet one more time. In the quiet of the empty hall, she placed her hand as close to the containment field as safety allowed, wishing she could touch the ancient crystal surface. "Thank you," she whispered to the explorers who had left this message so long ago. "Thank you for being brave. Thank you for leaving a warning. Thank you for reminding everyone that humans have always reached for the impossible." The symbols glowed softly in response, their ancient message finally understood after thousands of years of patient waiting. Beth wondered about those ancient humans, about the journey they must have taken. The wormhole they found must have seemed like magic or divine intervention. Did they argue about whether to use it? Were they scared? Did they know they might never get home? The Institute would keep searching for answers. They would find more settlements, more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle. They would track down the descendants of those ancient explorers, people scattered across the galaxy who had no idea their ancestors came from Earth. The story of humanity's first journey to the stars would finally be told in full. As Beth locked up for the night, she caught her reflection in a dark window. The woman looking back wore professional clothes and carried herself with earned confidence. But she could still see the janitor underneath, the woman who had spent years being invisible while quietly pursuing her curiosity. She smiled at her reflection. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came from the most unexpected people. Sometimes the impossible answer was found not in advanced laboratories, but in the personal interest of someone who cleaned floors and studied ancient history in her spare time. Beth thought about young humans across the Empire who would hear her story. The janitor who changed everything with curiosity and determination. She hoped it inspired them to trust their own insights, to pursue their own interests, to remember that being underestimated didn't mean being worthless. Above the city, stars scattered across the night sky. The same stars ancient humans had navigated by when they first pushed beyond Earth. The same stars that had called to Beth when she was young, promising adventure and meaning. Humans had always been explorers. They crossed oceans in fragile boats, climbed impossible mountains, and ventured into space when they barely understood what space was. 8,000 years ago or yesterday, the drive remained the same. Humans reached for the impossible. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes they succeeded. But they always reached. And now, finally, the galaxy understood that about them.